My name is Max Gagliardi. I'm here with my co-host David Heikkinen, and we're live for this week's episode of Talk.Energy Insights on September 10th, 2021. David, you want to start out talking a little bit about the markets, where we're at right now?
Yeah, first things first, we wrote it in our note today, but the 20th anniversary of September 11th, 2001, the loss of life, the loss of really uh, kind of freedom internally and externally. It's just something that hits home very closely. Everybody that's in the financial markets at my age, I was actually scheduled to be in New York marketing with PetroQuest and had meetings with Newfield Exploration in the World Trade Centers that morning. But
Yeah,
the
wow.
weekend before, the trip got canceled because of PetroQuest management. And I still remember like sitting in the office and my mom calling me from Arizona saying, "Where are you right now?" Just scared to death. So it's those memories never go away, and my heart goes out to everybody who suffered and lost lives and was really impacted by it. So I really wanted to hit that first and foremost as we're really positively the first anniversary of not being at war in Iraq or Afghanistan on September 11th, 2021.
Yeah,
So
that's crazy.
it's a new world. We'll see what happens over the next 20, but did want to put that thought out and share the thoughts with everybody first.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm glad you talked on that. I mean, for me, I think the other day someone asked me this question on the podcast, and I said I was 12. I was actually older. I was 14. I was a freshman in high school, and I remember sitting there at school and seeing it, and it was just a very shocking thing. And then the other part of it, I felt like in Oklahoma City, it was
oh yeah,
even more visceral, because prior to September 11th, we were the largest domestic terrorist incident in the U.S. And then September 11th happened. So I think the people here just felt like that eerie sense of what, obviously September 11th was a lot more loss of life, and I'm not trying to compare the two
no,
and say one's that similar, but at least it felt like there was this eerie feeling. People here definitely felt shook, because not only was it happening, but there was just that community element of kind of going through one of those terrorist attacks and having it happen in your city. And so it was just a surreal time. And to your point, 20 years later, and now not being in the Middle East, it's just kind of crazy that much time has gone past and all the things that have unfolded since then.
yeah, I was actually scheduled to run the Oklahoma City marathon, and then dropped back to the half marathon in April of 2020. I think it was the 25th anniversary of the federal building bombing. And that, if you've been to Oklahoma City or if you've been to New York, visiting both sites is something, or the museum, is just something that will touch you forever. The little chairs is what I always think about. And I ended up running the half marathon virtually last October. Uh, 5 trips around Rice University just wasn't quite the same. So hopefully we'll have races and things will get a little bit back to normal there as well. But yeah, I really do appreciate your perspective on Oklahoma City and the that as well. So
Let's
yeah,
launch into the markets. Tell us where we're
yeah.
at.
So yeah, let me just get my screen up. I mean, really, the last week it's just been a wild ride for natural gas. Like
I know.
we're now like it's the next 7 months, touching $5. Like propane and NGL prices up a ton. Crude oil has been bouncing around, essentially kind of flat for a week, but everybody feels all right in the $73 Brent, $70 WTI. I mean, the energy sector, though, we just looked, is now back to the last ranked sector in the S&P 500 again. NOV was dropped last week, and we're bottom of the barrel, even though the cash flows are flowing in. Broadly, you kind of had a rally and a correction in the crypto world. Copper actually, and then I've actually been making some investments in carbon, and I think there's some real things coming on the voluntary market and the compliance market for carbon that we should probably spend some time on the podcast in the coming days and weeks, both from a regulatory front nationally, but Aker just did a carbon capture solutions day yesterday. You've got CRC with one coming up in October. Denbury is all over it. I think Exxon, Chevron, it's just there's a real market emerging for all of us that's a growth sector in the energy space. We've been so beaten up as the worst performing sector so many years, year in, year out. And even after the big rally in energy this year and over the last 12 months, still being the last ranked stock sector and the S&P just doesn't feel right. But I do think the carbon markets are something that could really change the profile, and it's something we should talk some more about in the future.
Yeah.
So that's where things are in the markets. Like I did like your idea. I mean, we both have started up businesses about the same time frame, and kind of just talking about the entrepreneurial roller coaster. Just kind of wanted to hand it off to you. Anything in the gas markets? Are you seeing any activity pick up in Oklahoma on the private side? Just we're trying to figure out like who's going to rally to this
Yeah.
before we get into the entrepreneurial side, but it fits with your business. So.
I think the general consensus around natural gas for a lot of people that own assets today, and this is what I'm hearing from everything from I've got friends that own a couple little small working interests to guys that own big assets, is that the general feeling that I get is, can we sell our asset? It's the vibe that I'm getting from most people. I'm not hearing a lot about, I mean, guys are starting to drill and get active again, and you're seeing it in the rig count, and you're seeing stuff pop up, and it's just a good time to do that. You can, it's a great time to do that if you have the acreage and if you have the confidence of execution. But, I've got friends that, they say, hey, look, I got a working interest that usually does, $1,000, a couple grand a month, and now it's doing 15 grand a month. And it's like, should I just, if I can get 36 months, like I'm exiting this investment, right? It's like, so people are like looking at it and being like, and that's like the smallest level guys. And then the bigger guys, it's kind of like most of them have been, when we started Ancova, a couple of our early clients were like Felix One and Payrock, two in-cap back companies, and friends of ours and guys that had a tremendous success.
Yep.
And basically they both sold and had these exits. And we remember being like, oh man, those were great clients. And luckily they went on to do other things, and we've worked with them over the years. But we were worried that, hey, our business model, everybody's going to sell all the time. It's going to be a treadmill of finding new clients. Well, it turns out they were like the only clients that sold anything for like 6 more years, really. I mean, I'm exaggerating. People did end up selling some things, but it's been a tough time. Like if you had an investment and you put a bunch of money into the drill bit or into acreage, you've been sitting there on it. And so now with prices rallying, I think guys are of the mindset, it's really just, it seems like M&A and transactions. You either got a bunch of guys that want to buy stuff, which I think is getting increasingly challenging because where the prices are going. At the same time, though, people are motivated to transact. So even though prices have gone up and guys are like, oh man, I wish this would have happened after I bought these assets. But it's like, but that's actually lighting a fire under the sellers to say, let's move these assets. So I'm just seeing a lot of what I think is going to be churn, which is actually a good thing in a lot of ways for people that do advisory or consulting business, because that's activity, and we like activity.
Yep. Gotcha. So I was trying to think through on the public side, just to tie this to what I know. When you think about Oventive and Devon and Marathon and really Continental are kind of the bigger Oklahoma owners of assets today, all of them, even Oventive today just came out with a return of cash model, getting up at least 50% once they hit their debt targets. It's just, there's these boundaries of capital discipline that are being put on assets, and it'll be interesting to see who would be the buyer, who's the aggregator on the private side. I think private equity, smaller deals, there's going to be more transactions, and that's interesting insights that you got there, Max. So I think
you want to talk about, I was going to say one thing real quick on the markets. Well, the other thing I'll say is that so that's been incredible. The rising gas prices, again, every time we talk, it's like, is this sustainable? And I feel like it just keeps getting to the point to where now the pullback would have to be, I mean, it's one thing if you're kind of hovering like just under $4 or right over $4, but you start to get up into the mid to upper fours, and it's like, start to feel like, man, can we stay above $3 for a while? And again, I hate to make the call, but it just seems like with it being this global market, that's the case. And then there was this great thread on EFT that someone posted it on Twitter about how the biggest mistake that, the U.S. policymakers can make right now, especially the ones that are focused on climate change, would be to restrict the growth of new pipelines and new LNG export facilities. I mean, you're effectively just promoting coal. I mean, the coal industry should be backing every effort there is to stop natural gas pipelines and new LNG export facilities. Yet the environmentalists think that this is going to be a win. It's actually going to be a huge loss. I mean, any restriction of natural gas it's increasing CO2. That's what it's going to do. Yeah. And so the more we can link to this global network of natural gas, I mean, if you look at the US and you look at where the world's at, it still feels pretty bullish. I mean, we're still quite a bit cheaper than a lot of places. And so that's been happening. And then the last thing I'll say, like on the Bitcoin side, and I guess crypto in general, because you mentioned those markets, that's one too, that like from where Bitcoin was at, I think from the trough to the peak, it was up earlier this week 82%, from $29 to $53. And so we've had a pullback from 53, which seemed very coordinated. It was like the day that El Salvador announced it was going to be legal tender. And then quietly, like McDonald's, Starbucks, all these blue chip companies started using the Lightning Network, which is like the most bullish thing it's just incredibly bullish. And the day that happens, you get this onslaught of shorts coming in. So, but that market, I think the mining economics right now are just screaming, like hash price is over $400. You just got like, I just think it's really bullish for that market too. So those are my two comments on those. And I know we want to talk about entrepreneurship, but
I think those things that was my hobby and my biggest investments of 2020 personally were understanding the, kind of blockchain technology and kind of that evolution. And it fits right into carbon markets this year. And you hit on gas, like everything is linked, and European gas storage is low. It was interesting listening to Aker talk about, the barriers for carbon capture. In the US, it's pipelines as well. Like if you getting a carbon pipeline is seen as enabling fossil fuels, and it's actually exactly the opposite. It's the way you put CO2 into the ground again. And there's some interesting companies in Iceland that they talked about, but carbon capture in Europe is a burden of not in my backyard. You can't do it onshore, and so you have to do it offshore. And so there's effectively making the North Sea into a carbon sink. But like the enabler of power generation is going to be natural gas, and like that tied to, unless some breakthrough happens on green hydrogen, the blue hydrogen with carbon capture, gas-fired power generation with carbon capture. I just think there's a whole lot of natural gas uses that's going to drive gas to $6-7 over time, and that's kind of where global prices are. So
yeah,
we'll see. I'm pretty positive on it. We've got a low storage level. We've got undersupply per our supply demand model that we updated, really through 2023, 2024 in the U.S. unless we restrict exports. That's 9+ Bs a day of exports, both through pipes and LNG. But I don't think that's going to happen. And so the thing that's interesting on methane as a whole is, we keep talking about, you got to just stop flaring and venting. Like for the US, and I was catching up with the California markets, like they're one of the leading uses of technology for capturing. I got to give credit to Pioneer for putting in a couple vapor recovery units on every pad. To just basically, EOG and Oxy/Anadarko have gone to ventless situations like that. That is how you have a license to operate, and it's completely defensible. And that's where the U.S. needs to be. And I get excited about that type of efficiency, because you're just catching money. Like it's not even like your Bitcoin mining example is, you're just catching money. Like it's opposed
it's a
to
free
venting
market
it,
solution.
Right.
Free market solution to a problem.
There's dollar values per MCF and dollar values per coin. And like, it's wild to me that our industry, just lets it go into the atmosphere.
How much of that did you see did you see anything in the infrastructure bill that talked about stopping methane leaks or like reducing methane? Like they gave incentives, not like punishing people, but they gave incentives. I didn't see anything. I don't know.
I don't want to get too far down that road. We're doing some work on it. But there's some stuff out there that people ought to be aware of on the, you got the carrots of 45Q, but there's some sticks that are emerging that are pretty significant. And so just something we're working on. You kind of touched on it a little closer than I thought you would, but it's something that I think the world is going to need to be more aware of.
Well, we could do a whole pod. We could do a whole pod on this type of stuff. Yeah. Let's kick over into what was your journey like? Let's talk about the entrepreneurship stuff. It's something that people tend to like, that content, gravitate towards it. When I post or talk about it, it's stuff that people seem to engage with. There's also a lot of like influencers and people out there that's their whole brand, right? Is like talking about being a founder, being an entrepreneur. And some of it's kind of cringy, to be honest. And some of it's like, in my opinion, glossing over like the harsh truths of what it's actually like. And so maybe you just kind of launch into your journey a little bit, and we'll go back and forth on some of the experiences that we've had.
I mean, I was poor, so I had to mow lawns as a kid. So like, you could go back to age 12 and I was an entrepreneur, but it was for like, $2 and $5 in our neighborhood. But I went to work at Shell and then quit Shell after 8 years and went to this little firm, South Coast Capital, and took at least a 50% pay cut to make that leap to become a financial analyst. That was probably my first entrepreneurial step of just kind of making a bet on yourself.
Right.
And that turned into, joining Pickering Energy Partners version 1.0 and 05, and that grew into Tudor Pickering Holt. And what I saw at Shell and what I saw at South Coast and what I saw at Pickering and Tudor Pickering is just like the cultural things that like resonated with me, and then the things that didn't. And that's really why I decided to start our business at Heikkinen Energy. Like I just had this belief that like if you trust in the truth, and it's kind of the Jim Collins good to great mindset, and you kind of start out with the entrepreneurial roller coaster of believing all your own bullshit, and you got to actually believe way more of it than what anybody would ever believe in yourself or you. And then you kind of convince yourself of it, and you make the leap. But man, I'll tell you, like I give credit to, and I actually encourage everybody as young as you possibly can to make the bet on yourself and take as much risk as possible, because time is our biggest asset, and time gives you a lot of opportunities to recover.
Right.
And that's probably the lesson of perseverance. But the other side that I think you also need to hit is, man, don't take too long to make decisions. Like that's my biggest mistake as a business manager, as a person. Like when something feels off, man, you got to change it as fast as you can. Like firing people, hiring people, making directional decisions. There's the ego that gets into not just personal side, but the people that work with you. Is something that you have to move fast, and
Right.
and it's like cover and move is a military tactic that this guy Jocko Willink talks about a lot in the podcast.
Yeah, Jocko's great.
And you can't just sit in one place or you're going to get shot. But if you all move at once, you're all going to get shot too. And so like you got to cover and move, and just keep stepping forward, never backwards.
Right.
So yeah, that's been my lesson. But like we started Heikkinen Energy at this little cupcake shop above a cupcake shop, and we called ourselves Cupcake Capital. And it's just a handful of people in 2013, just trying to get the right people in the right place, and the right people on the bus, and then develop mind share. And with mind share then comes revenues. And that's kind of our history. What about, so you started about the same time frame?
Yeah.
We were 2013. You were right after us, I think.
Yeah. Like the late summer, fall of 2014. And for me, it was kind of out of necessity. And I've told the story before on the podcast, the history of it. I did like a Talk.Energy Direct. And what I will say is that it's one of those things where I was dreaming and scheming, as I always joke around and say that, right? But I did a lot of that back when I was younger. Like even when I first started in my career and worked for a big company, I just couldn't stop from daydreaming about being an entrepreneur. And I remember I talked to a guy named Evan Anderson who founded Osberg. He's come on the podcast, and we went to lunch, and I was like really impressed. I think he was in his 20s at the time and had this company, this tech startup. And I was asking him, all these questions, and told him that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And he said, well, a good way to not be an entrepreneur is talk about it all the time. He's like, that's a good way to never do it. And he just like, I remember it was kind of an asshole answer, but it like stuck with me. And I was just like, you're right. And he's like, you just have to do, basically, was his like response. And it was harsh, but it was the truth. And I remember, so what happened to me is like made a move over to AEP. Thought it was a great opportunity. Idolized Aubrey McClendon for a lot of years, and sometimes when I worked with Aubrey, I learned the things not to do, not just the things to do. I mean, I got to see, especially at AEP, I worked very closely with him in meetings every day, one-on-one, talking to him, working through deals, and got to see kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly with him as an entrepreneur. But followed him over there, and it didn't work out. And that just kind of fell apart. Like our group, my boss and I, we left, and I got basically a package there, and I'd just gotten over there. And then over the next 6 to 12 to 18 months, it just kind of completely unraveled. And so I had been on this career trajectory where it was just going up. I had all this opportunity. I'd been working on, when I was at Chesapeake in Oklahoma, we were running 65 rigs in our district. And I had about a third of those were just for me, like doing all the midstream marketing sales for all that. So I just had this incredible opportunity. And then I found myself basically, unemployed and prior to that in my career, you know, you're working for like the 800-pound gorilla. I mean, even at AEP, it was like everybody takes your call. Everybody wants to talk to you. Everybody, you know, you have all this. It's just so easy, right? And then it goes from you find out about this quick who cares about you and who doesn't, because the people that aren't taking your call anymore, the second that you're unemployed, and it's most people, 90+% of people, they're just like, you know, oh, wait, I don't need something from you anymore. And so it's very humbling and very difficult, right? And so then it was like, what do I do? And I remember my dad, like 2 weeks after being on my own, just kind of, he's like, hey, let's go get a beer. Went and got a beer. And he's like, what have you been doing? And I just told him, like, oh, you know, I've been applying for these jobs and did this and this, and went and played golf a bunch of times. I kind of bragged about that. And he was like, you're not doing enough. He was like, you need to go create an LLC. He's like, have you made an LLC yet? And I was like, no. He's like, go do that. He's like, now. He's like, tomorrow. He's like, I want to see the certificate of LLC. He's like, you need to go make business cards. You need to go sign up. He's like, you need to be at a lunch every day. You need to be at events. What are the next conferences coming up? He's like, sign up for them. So just basically like pushed me to say, what are you going to do? And that's when I just started making phone calls and just saying, hey, look, you know, it's a lot harder to get, and I've told this to people before that are looking for a job. It's hard sometimes to get somebody to take a chance on you for a full-time gig. But if you have knowledge, specific knowledge, then go out and try to, you know, create value for somebody. And so just started making phone calls, got a couple consulting things landed, ended up my partner, Mark Edge, used to be my vice president at Chesapeake, has a wealth of knowledge and contacts. And he had left Chesapeake, and we went and got a beer and talked and started working together. And fast forward, we looked up, and we like to joke that we kind of had a company before we knew we had a company, because we were just busy. We had, you know, multiple clients and these things going on, and we incorporated. And so I've told the story before, so I won't tell the whole story. But what I will say is that it's being an entrepreneur, people from the outside looking in, seems really glamorous. It seems really like, you know, and people like Founders Twitter and all this stuff, or the founders get on and talk about it. And I'm guilty of it too, making posts. But it's not like, you know, yeah, you can make posts afterwards to pat yourself on the back, but while you're doing it, I mean, it's gritty. Like, it's not like this thing where you know, there's a ton of uncertainty. There's a ton of fear and stress. And like, I think the mental health involved with being an entrepreneur, I mean, maybe there's some people that are just truly built differently that just don't have that weighs on them. But for me, like, it's very hard mentally, because you pour so much of yourself into it. And like, it's almost like gambling. And I don't mean that in the sense that you're taking crazy risks. I mean it in the sense of like the highs are high and the lows are low, right? Like, you're putting yourself you're putting your whole, you know, life and everything into this. You're taking away time from your family, doing all this stuff. And like, when something doesn't pan out, like, it just hurts so much. But then even when something does work and you do have a win as an entrepreneur, it feels like you almost can't even feel happy about it. Like, my wife will be like, how did it go today? I'm like, oh yeah, we signed 2 big clients, whatever. And she's like, why are you not, like, are we going to celebrate it, whatever? And I'm just like, nah, because I think these other 2 clients are going to sell their company and we may lose. It's just, you never even get a chance to really feel good most of the time. You're just worried. That's how I am, at least. But I don't know. I'm rambling on this. But kick it back to you from some of those emotions and just the way that, you know, mentally how you handle doing that whole career path.
I totally relate to the, you know, I call it the jersey, the name on the front of your jersey versus the name on your back. Like, as a football player, you know, if you're Tom Brady, you know, you got the name on the back that matters. And, you know, Hiking and Energy was my name on the back and the front, but you know, it's just not the same. Like, it, and like you are right. It is, you know, the people that'll take your call are different. And you essentially, we're doing it now at Pickering Energy Partners again, as far as just reestablishing the Insights brand of, people don't know in the public markets who Pickering Energy is, candidly. Like, I've been like, you know who Tudor Pickering is, but like the spinoff of asset management, like, it's again restarting with the name on the jersey first, and reproving what you have to do. And like, it's the issue on being an entrepreneur is you're essentially trying to prove yourself every day. Like, it is like, and like those celebrations, like when you do it, you're like, well, shit, I thought I had to do this. So it's not something you celebrate, and you actually tend to get to the times where you don't have the successes. And so like, and you focus on those, like the misses become like the thing that you dwell on. And like, that is true. Like, it's that, it is that burden of the people that are with you and around you. Like, I don't know how many employees you have, but I remember this moment. I was on the board of a little private company, and the CEO of the company walked up to me, and we were having a Christmas party where we had essentially everybody inside around tables, like all the families, and like, it's all the kids and, you know, spouses, and they're all making gingerbread houses. And I'm trying to remember how it was. Logan walked up, and I was like, so what are you thinking about? I was like, all those people are my responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. No, I feel that all the time. And it's just like really, it's difficult. I mean, because you are then, the successes are, I feel like the failures are amplified and the successes are just like, that's what was supposed to happen.
Well, and that's where the issue is. And like, so I was looking back, and I'm a big documenter of stuff. So I looked back at our 2013 and our 2014 plans, and as we were talking about being an entrepreneur, and then we launched a fintech business essentially with Max Germain, and a tech business with Slavo Pastor, and then we had a consulting oil and gas acquisition vehicle called Blue Wave Oil and Gas that was trying to buy properties, because really my vision has always been that, amplifying your time through assets is, you can only sell hours for so much, but actually deploying capital is where you get a multiple of value
Right.
creation. And that's we were an hourly sales business trying to build out the asset side, really for the almost the entire time that we were doing Hiking and Energy Advisors. Like, we had a hedge fund strategy that we were actively managing from, I guess it's probably late 2018 through mid 2020, when Michael Hall left to go actually be an asset manager. There was always trying to figure out the angle to get to something that was more than just selling our time. But those things also, then you end up investing so much time and energy in them
So
that they can
much.
become a distraction. Like, it's an
Right.
interesting, like, push pull of saying no is probably the hardest thing to say when you're an entrepreneur, but you gotta say no.
Yeah.
You gotta hire the right people and fire the right people. You gotta make those decisions quickly. I always found the hardest part for me, that I've learned a lot, was because you're the guy that is making the decisions, you and your partners and your managers. Like, it's always this process of, like, I think about the alphabet of, like, I've gone through A through K on the decision making, and I'm close to Z, but then it's like everybody else is still at A. And so you got this, like, reversion of, like, I know we need to get to K, and then I want to
Right.
go to Z. I think we're already at K, but the whole, like, it's kind of like when you're flying an airplane and you ever have a problem, they say that the passengers are behind the airplane. Well, you're as a manager and an entrepreneur, you're the pilot, and alarms start going off, and you finally land the plane safely, and then all your passengers freak out. And
Yeah.
like, they see, then, like, wait, we really did have a problem.
Right.
That's kind of what I saw as a manager in a startup. Of you're kind of relying upon yourself for every decision. And candidly, like, that's probably the biggest benefit of Pickering Energy Partners for me is, and it took me about 6 weeks to get to this revelation that all those decisions, like, there are really smart people upstairs, like downstairs now, that are thinking about those things, and they're not all mine anymore. And that's a freaking revelation, as and giving it up a little bit as a CEO, but it's also like this huge burden that's been off me for about the last 3 weeks. Candidly, like, it's a mindset shift that you're still living in the fire, but it's hard for you to appreciate how hot it is until you can actually take a step back and realize where your real responsibilities are, and that there's people around you that can actually are out with your best intentions, and are taking those responsibilities on. You just have to trust in them.
Yeah.
So that's what you get to on the exit side. Whenever you sell your business, we can talk about it, but I just experienced it, experienced a merger, and now it's like that kind of relief factor takes a little bit, and that's where I think, as if I looked back on my time, I probably bore too much of the burden internally. And it sounds like where you are, like, you're not seeing that every person that's part of your organization it's a 50-50 deal. Like, you decide to hire and work with them, they're your partners and peers, but they decide to come on board as well.
Yeah.
And so, like,
Right.
when they decide to come, it's not 100% on you. It's half on them, and really more than half on them, because they can leave at any point in time, and you can just try to keep them.
Right.
And that's the other factor that I think I felt like I bore more of that internally than I should have, as I look back on things. And as I was listening to you, it kind of triggered that same feeling that sounds like you're kind of living through now.
I feel like looking, I've told people this before, and there's been times with more stress versus less stress. Every year, there's something that I can look back that was a big stressor, whether that was a deal, that didn't go through the way we wanted it to, whether that was a partnership that didn't pan out the way we wanted it to pan out. But, we've had some years where extremely stressful, like bad partnerships. We've been in things where we've done, we partnered with some other entity and tried to do something and found out they weren't who we thought they were. They didn't live up to their bargain, didn't follow by their contracts. I've learned about being in, what a contract really means. And I've learned about the legal system, like what it means to have an agreement with somebody. It doesn't mean a lot unless you're willing to litigate it. Right. And so what I found is that people will ask me how I feel or what it's like. And I just feel like I'm old. I feel like I've aged. Like I literally, like I remember like when I was 28, 29, and I'm looking in the mirror, seeing gray hairs popping in, like, and it just was directly, I felt like correlated to stressful things that were happening to me in the business side. And when people asked me about it, I was like, I feel like it's aged me. Like I feel older because of the amount that it weighs on you all the time. And then to your point, but you learn to live with that. I think the first thing I had to live with was the uncertainty. And that was like the hardest thing. And it's still hard to this day, but just to like when you're at a big company or when you're working for somebody or working at an organization, I think that it's really easy to kind of like project in your mind, 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, like even though that's not real, because anything can happen, anything can change. And a lot of times in an organization, it may even be more risky because you don't have any control and they could just up and let you go, or the company could get merged or something could happen. Right. But in your head, I think it's very easy to plan these milestones because you can say, all right, well, my next bonus is here. And then, I'll probably get a raise and then maybe I'll get a promotion in this many years. And then you can kind of like in your mind, like linearly track out this future, whether that's real or not, you just do it like in your head. And then when you're an entrepreneur, you don't know what's going to happen next week. You don't know what's going to, so people ask me, it's like, well, what's the plan? It's like, I don't know what's going to happen in 6 months or a year. And at first, like just living with that for somebody that's I think my wife would say I'm kind of a control freak around things, but it's like for someone that wants control and that, that's part of the reason why I am an entrepreneur is because I want control. To not know or to have that uncertainty is just like, it's like debilitating, the amount of stress that can put on you. But then you just have to learn to deal with it. You have to just say, you know what, I got to get done what I got to get done today. And if I can do what I got to do today, then tomorrow is probably going to be all right. And if I can focus on at least this week and map this week out, then 6 months from now, a year from now is going to work out. I don't know how it's going to work out, but I know that if I just do what I got to do now, then I have to have faith that in 6 months and in a year. And so it just gets back to this like belief in yourself and betting on yourself. And so that's been one of the hardest things I've had to deal with. And then real quick, before I kick it back, one other thing I'll say is that you talked about the asset strategy thing. We've been down that rabbit hole too. I mean, we raised a $200 million commitment. We've gone and chased assets. Basically the last 4 years of my life, I've been chasing the shiny thing, which is getting away from selling my time, getting away from our marketing business is really scalable. And I love that business because you're not selling your time, you're creating value in another way. And it's very scalable, but the advisory business is hard to scale. I mean, it's like, you gotta hire people basically to scale it. Yeah. And that's difficult. And so chasing an asset strategy, that's another thing. And that resonated with me. What you said is that you just pour so much of yourself into this vision that you have, and you look up and it's a lot of question marks. It's like, would I have been better spent like just chasing more advisory or getting better at, and so you pick these paths and you start to steer the ship, and you can look up and it's 4 years have gone by and you devoted something of your life to something. And it just like, COVID hit and all these things happened and prices were bad. And it's just like, there is no blueprint. You just do the best you can. And then you look back and you live with it. But sorry, but keep going with.
No, I think you're spot on. Like it's that, that's where I was saying, like all the different things that you try to do. And you look at mergers. We looked at so many different things, and I was trying to think of the biggest failure that I had as an entrepreneur. I think it's probably around the people side of not communicating openly fast enough.
Yeah.
And like not like the getting into like the true way of like correcting behaviors before they become a problem, and then like just not seeing it. There's no solution other than like the termination solution at that point. That's probably the thing that I've learned the most is like having that hard discussion in life, like having the honest, hard discussion of transparent and just laying it out there. You only have your own truth, and people, Ray Dalio talks about Bridgewater a lot, that inside the company, and his principles are worth at least reading, and then determining what your principles are is what I'd say was my takeaway from that. But everybody thinks differently than you do. Nobody is, if you had everybody at a table, they've even studied this inside of Bridgewater of like asking people, how did you make that decision? And like measuring, like just effectively hitting real-time feedback of this is working for me, this isn't working for me as people are presenting. And then they've analyzed all the data of decision makers, and like the takeaway that I've seen, and because again, getting people from A to Z in the way you want to go, it's, I don't live in a world of mandates. I've always thought of my managers and employees as partners and peers. And I try to do, there are times where I'm the boss and, got examples of, well, this person has to work on this, not that for you. And, those are the direct conversations. But I'll tell you, like when you get to the same decision with your partners and peers, and then you ask them how they got there, I mean, it is not the same direction. Like there are personal motivations, there are professional motivations, there are team and
Right.
organizational ideas. There's, everybody has life going on, in and around them. We've had people that were partners with major health issues in their family. Like there's just like as a leader and as an entrepreneur, unless you're just on your own, which I've only done for a year, kind of felt like consulting and kind of felt like a hobby, candidly, whenever I was working with this private equity group in New York and just kind of doing some things on the side, a couple transactions here and there. Actually co-founded a company that I don't need to say, but that didn't work out.
Yeah.
So made some good decisions and bad decisions. But there's an interesting like track record of like once you're in though, like you just get in, like you were saying, like you're living, eating, and breathing it like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's it does, I don't know if ages you or is the right word. There are times when it is aging, there are times whenever it's actually invigorating, and
Right.
then there are times where you just don't even know what you're doing other than what you have to do that day. And that's probably what I heard you say, that like it's like a daily, journaling and routine of what must I get done. And then what you find is you don't get those things done most of the time
Right.
unless you're really focused on it. So I,
What I was, go ahead.
I was
Finish
going to
that
go
thought.
through the failure on people is probably the first one.
Right.
The other thing I think is I should have shut my business down in 2018, and I've got a journal record of like doing that. And I didn't do it because of all the people that were in the organization. But I actually have seen now that like, a handful of people are still actually with Pickering Energy Partners. But I think we're like 35 people at one point, and
Yeah.
everybody went off and like found other jobs. Um, I personally had like written about it about a month of like the end of 2018. Every day I was like, okay, here's how we get there. Fear set around it, like went through that whole process. And the only reason I didn't was that it was pure ego in hindsight of trying to keep the people together and take care of them. But like that was like, it would have maximized the value of the business. It would have just been a much better outcome. And so knowing when to fold them is something that I say, or knowing when to walk away. I think that's probably the hardest thing for entrepreneurs to do in my personal experience. Um, and I think that's something that you just have to be aware of in any venture you're doing. Like you need to know when a change is needed for you, and react to it. And that's where the career people that I know, I mean, I remember when I was at Shell, there was an 80-point solution, which was your age plus your years of service. And there was a spreadsheet that was sent around to everybody where you could put your birthday in. And it was a countdown essentially of the rest of your life to 80 points. And I know people that are still living in that pension program that are friends of mine that like have been counting it down. And like life is not a countdown. Like it's just shocking to me that as a 22-year-old I got this spreadsheet. um I guess that was a long time ago now, but the reality is I'd probably be pretty close to 80 points right now. But the things worked out all right. So yeah, so those were the two things I'd say from a failing standpoint of like not taking action is probably the biggest lesson, and something that I don't do anymore. I take action very, very quickly, personally and professionally. And I think it's probably the most important thing that I've learned as an entrepreneur.
Sorry, I don't know why I was muted.
Yeah.
I said the communication thing you said was big. I mean, that is hard to do, but I think being transparent with people and just being honest, it's like, that's the best thing. It's just, hey, this is what's going on with the business. This is what's happening. This happened over here. This is a good thing. This is a bad thing. Letting people know. I think that alignment structures is a big thing too. Like giving people skin in the game, giving people, especially if you have partners or something, it's like, you hear a lot about management teams where, somebody gets way more of the pie than somebody else. And that's just, it's not going to work. It's just not. Like over time, like that will erode and dissolve. And that person that's not at an equitable stake, they're not going to be there. They're going to be plotting something different because they don't, so learning these things as you go and being like, let's just be open, transparent, equitable. It's key to having the people around you that you want to have around you. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I have, and I'm trying to fix that this last year, is just not utilizing technology enough in our business, especially through communication and through, getting the word out, like with the podcast and with Twitter and all these things. And what I found is that even through like Twitter and stuff, it's like, I'm going to put myself, I'm not one of these people on social media really that's like polished. Like I have someone writing my stuff for me. I'm just doing what I want to put out there and do. And sometimes it's maybe you look back at a post or something, you're like, it was what it was. Maybe I shouldn't have posted that. But the reality is it's like, this is me, it's raw. And so what I found is that like, it's connecting me with a lot more people. I wish I would have done this earlier. One of the I should have had a Twitter and have been, cultivating this for a decade, and I haven't. And that's a huge mistake because the amount of network I've lost, network opportunity costs I've lost is huge. And then the other thing is that like, I'm not that worried about the bad posts or the things that I look back on and I'm like, should I said that or done this? Like you just put yourself out there. And as long as you're being you, what you're going to find is you'll find the people that like you, and you'll find the people that don't like you, and you'll find them a lot faster by doing that. And that's okay. Like, the people that like you and that really like you, you should just be happy that you found those people because that's awesome. And if you can aggregate as many of those people as you can, that's huge. And the people that don't like you, that's good too, because they probably wouldn't have liked you anyways. And so you're identifying them quicker than you would have otherwise. So putting yourself out there and doing it, I think is something that's been big for me, and it's still evolving, but I just don't see much downside really with being out there and being open and being in the world. And it's like, and I've said this a bunch, and it probably sound like a broken record, but it's if the tree falls in the woods example. And if it doesn't, if no one's there to hear, it doesn't make a sound. Like, I don't care how good you are at your business or your thing or whatever you focus on, if you're a finance guy, land guy, geologist, whoever, if you're like really good, you're the best at it, but nobody knows who you are and you're not connecting with people, then it doesn't really matter. Like the people that you touch every day are going to know, but if you're only touching just those immediate people in your circle of influence, then you're limited so much on that talent that you have. And so I think that that's the other way I've tried to evolve, is just figure out how to put myself out there. And then, one thing I need to do better at probably is just, and this gets back to what you mentioned earlier, is like, where do I focus my effort? I've been trying a lot to just focus on what I feel like are my talents. And that is kind of origination and administration. Like I don't need to really be in the weeds on things. Like when I get into the weeds and start to try to, make the spreadsheet or do the thing, like sometimes you have to do it, but it's like, what's my ROI on that? And like, I have really talented people around me that are better at me than those things. So like focus on things like communicating, getting the word out, having conversations, like working on business development, which is origination. I think that's kind of like my passion and what I'm good at. And then like administration, like empowering other people to make the decisions that they need to make. And like where our business really hit our stride is when I stopped getting CC'd on all the emails. I was like, don't CC me on these emails. Like you're the decision maker. Like people would come to me early on and it's hard. And they're like, well, what should I say to this client? This and this. And I'm like, well, what do you think you should say? And they're like this. I'm like, that's great. Just say it. Like, like, I mean, in that, like you give people a little bit of leeway, and then sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes you're kind of like, hey, like, maybe I wouldn't have gone about it this way, but you be like, just upfront with them about it. And then you don't be like an asshole about it. Just be like, hey, look, you kind of approach it this way. Typically we would look at it this other way. Whatever. So that sometimes you have to have that conversation. But what I found is that conversation is usually pretty rare. Usually if you hire the right people and you have good people that are smart, capable, they're making the good decisions, and you are more powerful because they are empowered. Micromanaging them, you are less powerful because they are not empowered. And that is not a way, in my opinion, not the way that I do things. And so when I look at what I've done and what I'm doing now, I feel like that this is kind of my calling, honestly. Like I can't imagine myself really doing anything else. Like I know that sounds weird, and maybe that sounds, I don't know if that sounds, like boasting about something, but I just feel like this is what I want to do. It's what I like doing. I'm passionate about it. Like I enjoy it. And whether it's successful or not, and pursuing these ventures, it's like, it's what I wake up every day. And when I go in and it's like, I want to do it. It's like why I do the podcast. It's like, it's work technically, but like I enjoy it. Like, and I want to do things that I enjoy. And that's what I'm going to try to focus my life on, for better, for worse. And I hope it's turned out good so far, but you know, it's a risk, right? I mean, it's not the safest path chasing the things that you just like, or maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah, you said something about the reason we're doing these and kind of what the impact is I enjoy talking with you. So that's been my logic. And this is a conversation that it's like we have a bunch of people that are potentially eavesdropping on, and hopefully they take something away from it. But the reality is like the network effects of sharing your persona and sharing the way you think about things. And you know, Twitter is one way to do it. LinkedIn seems to be as well. I think our digital persona is going to be something that gets very connected over time, and it's going to change the entire way that people form organizations. And I'm not trying to go way down the road, but just imagine the way movies come together, where, you know, if you ever watch one of the big movies, there's the team that's in New Zealand that comes together, and you know, you have your grip and you have your director and you have your actors, and they all come together in one place. They film something and then they go off and they've accomplished that task. And I've thought about it a lot as far as how organizations come together. And yeah, it's as a project manager at Shell, we always had this like inside the fence project and the team, and it could be, you know, you had a Shell project manager, Shell engineer, and FMC subsea project manager, the oceaneering umbilicals guy, the, you know, camera, like you had all these people that had different business cards that came together to do one project, and they were effectively inside the fence. And then outside the fence, we would have like whatever facility we were tying to. And, you know, we tied back to the Bullwinkle facility, and they had a big project team that was building all the capacity to tie that in. And that inside the fence group is, you had to interface on the external side, but like you could bring together teams and figure out how to work regardless of your business card. And that was in the 90s. And I actually think that all projects might move in that direction over time.
Right.
And I actually think that this process of laying out how I think about things and how you think about things is really sharing the way that people might want to work with us in the future. And the network of the 2000s was Microsoft Outlook and your contact list.
Yeah.
The network of the 2010s was LinkedIn. And I think the network of the 2020s and beyond is like a full digital persona that,
right.
yeah, you could look at the social network, like, or the Netflix series on like how the world is assembling a view of all your purchasing patterns, and all that stuff beforehand is like the devil of this digital persona. But like there's an angel in the digital persona as well, of like how we've met and like how this has kind of grown from there. And, you know, we'll probably do some work together that hopefully makes us money in the future. But like the reality is like there's that network that is so compelling. And that's where, like, you know, like you said, you'll know who you want to work with and who you don't.
Yeah.
I know you had to stop at 10 o'clock.
I do. Yeah.
And I do too. I've got to call, and I've got to get my daughter to a little doctor's appointment. But
this is a fun episode. I could do like hours of talking about this type of stuff just because it's what I'm passionate about. So
yeah, we ought to figure out a way to put links, like things that we've used that have, you know, been beneficial. Like there's this Peter Thiel, How to Start a Startup podcast, that freaking genius on, you know, trying to find businesses where you're 0 to 1 is the business. Like if there's no business that does what you do and you're the first one, that means you have no competition, and that's a huge opportunity. Like there's this management trinity training course of how you provide feedback, how you spend time with your people one-on-one, building relationships internally and externally, and then how you actually coach people. Like there's some little things that were like lessons that are just very effective. And don't take a whole lot of time.
I made a post that was like, people seemed to like it, and it was, some people were it was polarizing a little bit. They didn't, you know, they kind of said, hey, I don't like this message. But basically I said, people asked me like what, you know, to learn, or what book should I read about entrepreneurship? And I basically said like entrepreneurship is like, it's like you need to learn about history. You need to learn about, you know, all these different things I listed off. I was like, you need to learn about I can't even go and blank on the list. But basically it was just like, you know, learn about physical fitness, learn about history, learn about math, I listed like every subject off, and I said, but don't read books. Like I said, you can read books specifically about entrepreneurship, but what you really should be reading is just a little bit of everything. I think being well-rounded is like just as important, right? It's like not getting caught up in like, read a book about networking. That's great. Read how to win friends and influence people. I try to read that book every couple of years. I reread it. It's a good one. But if you just read books about networking, then you're just going to be like doing cheesy networking stuff all the time. There's a place for that, and you need to do that. But
maybe you love networking. Like maybe that's your calling. But
read, take a break and read a book about science. Read a book about history. Read a book about economics. Like or listen to a podcast, right? Or listen to a book. Like I actually listen to a lot of things, and so when I give the people advice on that, and I'll link. Maybe we should do a book list or something. I think I've been thinking about doing more with the books that I read. But I just think that the best thing to do is try to be as well-rounded as you can. In my opinion, I don't know, maybe that's wrong. Some people really argued with me on that one. They're like, no, this is dumb. Like physical fitness has nothing to do with entrepreneurship. And my comment was like, well, if you're really unphysically fit, it's probably going to be hard to be focused on, everything helps, I guess. Just being a well-rounded person, I think is a good trait.
Yeah. Trying to decide if I'm well-rounded or just have high energy. I'm pretty narrowly focused on a few things, but I like solving problems. That's probably one of the other things. I'll leave it at that.
Yep, we got to
jump. You just have to be ready to solve some problems, and we'll put together a list of and put it out on Twitter for both of us. We'll figure a way to publish it of things that we both have used, because we've had about the same long history and have had our own measures of success. So Enjoyed the conversation.
Yep.
Next week, we'll try to get a guest on, and I know you're going to be in Disney World. I've actually got some vacation time planned as well. So we'll get a third person on as well. And just an update on Dee in New Orleans. Like she's back at home. Like it sounds like they're not doing a great job of hauling trash away. And they're still, the whole city smells is the way I still advise her weekly on her business and getting things up and running. But sounds like the week of the 20th of September is whenever a lot of places will start opening up again. And if you're looking for a way to support that area, whether or not it's Houma, Laplace, or New Orleans, just traveling and visiting sometime in October, it's probably the right decision and best thing you can do. So
absolutely.
That's all I got.
All right, David.
Enjoyed the conversation. Have a good one, y'all.
I'll see you.
All right.